What are some personal characteristics that you had to develop?
Make sure that I am flexible enough to learn and to change also my tactics.
He just walked by me and he said, "Shame on you," and he spit on me, like in the middle of the street.
Takes this window down and then in Armenian says,
How do you handle or think about this issue of emotional abuse?
Understanding that it's an urgent issue that requires an urgent response.
They scolded her and told her that it's wrong to snitch against your husband.
My body is not mine. It's like everyone's else, but not mine.
I felt so much shame and guilt that I didn't wear that dress again, ever. Welcome to the Soulful Entrepreneur podcast. I'm your host, Lucy Stepanyan. Today's guest is Mariam Torosyan. She is the founder and CEO of SafeYou, which is a mobile app that empowers women and girls by preventing gender-based violence and raising awareness about the issue. Welcome to the podcast, Mariam.
Thank you for having me, Lucy.
So I want to start with talking about the fact that you started this startup, SafeYou, about 4 years ago. And within about a month, you actually got product market fit. And then within 4 years, you're now leading a $30 million startup, which has a valuation of $30 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, about.
Right. I want to talk about what is leading before you actually founded the startup. So what type of body of work were you doing? Because as an entrepreneur, looking outside in, I can think that this was a magical success, like really fast, everything happened. What were you doing before that?
Yes, before that there was a lot of preparation probably. So I'm a lawyer by trade. I entered university when I was 16 and I was passionate about law, the reforms that we can make in this country, and I was picturing myself working in legislative power and improving laws in the country. And then, but also I understood that for this I need more practice. But when I was graduating already from French university, I was thinking that I need also to know better the theory of law and state, all the doctrines, etc. So I became then constitutional lawyer, human rights, theory of law and state, everything that gives you the big picture of how society can be organized or disorganized also.
More disorganized than organized?
Yes, and what are the, let's say, forces that you can, and how to combine them to make sure that growth is sustainable, that there is development, along with democracy and all other things. For my PhD research, I went to Switzerland to do research in intersection of law and social anthropology. Then because I have very strong genes of, because all my family, they're all doctors, medical doctors, and then I got very interested in public health, and because I was already doing some research at intersection of public health, I started working in an NGO in Armenia that was mainly working in the field of reforming public health, let's say, part of healthcare system. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of legislative work, and I fell in love also with that part of my career, let's say, and public health became another important part of my background. And I didn't know why so many different things. It was all of them, they were very interesting for me, mm-hmm. and every new career path was opening a new door, new understanding, a different perspective of understanding sometimes even the same issues. But there was always a question in me why I'm doing so many different things. Yeah. And with SafeYou, everything kind of came to one place, because violence against women is a human rights issue. It's a social, cultural issue, but it is also a public health issue. And before starting SafeU, I was already very passionate about startups, about innovation, technology, artificial intelligence. I was running with my husband, we were running the small incubator in Armenia, organizing startup competitions, mentoring startups, bringing some funding for them. And that was already a piece that I felt like, okay, I see here that all the change can be accelerated. There is a way, and technology is the way. And when it came to SafeU, I already had all these, let's say, skills, not all the skills, but at least I had the entire vision of how we put the things together to succeed.
Yeah. So right before SafeU, you also did some body of work on gender-based violence itself, correct?
Yes. Yes. I started the research with Enterprise Incubator Foundation. I was invited to lead the research that they won from World Bank Group to find innovations tackling gender-based violence. And throughout my research, I understood that unfortunately, all the technologies that were created, either they failed or they couldn't find a market fit or business models to sustain. And yes, that was the research piece as a researcher that I have done. And it was very interesting, actually, to do this research globally, I would say, and see why one of the biggest social issues, one of the most pressing social issues that exist in this world doesn't have a decent, let's say, solution when it comes to technology and innovation, while the humanity is so empowered by technology and innovation nowadays. But when it comes to real social issues, then there is lack of solutions.
Yeah, because there is lack of money and lack of, I wouldn't say lack of funding, because funding exists in that area, but it's more social funding or NGOs, right, nonprofits. Whereas funding for as a startup, people think there's less profit in that because you're tackling the problem of vulnerable populations. But in this case, I think you found the right place and right time to start SafeU. And I want to hear the story of, first of all, why you started, and then also, I know you were pregnant when you actually started SafeU, and you were writing the proposal and the wireframes. Can you walk us through the process of why that, what pushed you to actually start the company?
Well, yes, I was already conducting research when I was pregnant, and I informed my colleagues that, I will not stay long because then I need to go to my maternity leave, and then I was teaching at the medical university. That was my one of my main jobs, I would say, along with working with different NGOs and also my startup incubator. So I had a lot of things going on, and of course I understood that, okay, this research is just this is something very interesting, but probably it's just temporary, and it was my initial understanding of what I'm doing. But being pregnant and being in this already the final phase of research, at one family gathering, an elderly woman asked me, she said, "Oh, you look beautiful, it means that you're going to have a boy." And then she added, this is a very important piece, she said, "This is your first child, it should be a boy." And well, I smiled back to her, but then I asked myself this question: what's wrong with this world that one woman, elderly woman, tells another woman that being a woman who is not even born yet is something undervalued or less important than being a boy? And the answer to this question has many layers, is the entire book. But the worst chapter of that book is the gender-based violence, because women are also, they don't born because of their sex,
Right.
and they're killed because of being women.
Yeah.
So we're living in a country which has a high rate also of sex-selective abortions. We have femicide cases globally. 50,000 women are killed just because they are women by their intimate partners or family members, and this is very alarming. And because I knew it, I was doing this research, it was the information that I was every day analyzing, then I said, there is no way I leave this research on the paper. because I don't want my daughter to be asked one day the same question, or I don't want her to live in a world where she's undervalued or she can face any type of violence just because she's a woman. And that was a very firm understanding right at that moment, that there is no way I'm gonna let this just be on a paper. I need to work hard on this to create a solution. And I knew that it's going to be very difficult. It's a long journey, and it still continues to be a long and challenging journey. But yeah, I have the patience to pursue my vision.
Yeah, but you have the patience because you have a mission at heart, which kind of pushes you to move forward. As an entrepreneur, we'll get back to the GBV, the gender-based violence topic in a bit, but as an entrepreneur, what is interesting to me is the process of creating the startup. So I went through, maybe I worked on 2 products that were unsuccessful. And I made a prototype, I launched it with a short pilot, I pivoted, I tested out, and then I killed the product. So how did you start out? You built frameworks, and then this frameworks turned into a prototype. And then can you walk us through the process of getting to a product market fit idea?
Yes. So part of it, it was of course the outcomes of the research of different technologies that I understood why why they failed, or what was the issue that they were not successful. And then I started thinking what women really need. And then I started going and having meetings in shelters with survivors of domestic violence, meeting with different organizations, not only in Armenia, but also in other countries, to find some similarities, because it's a global issue and the patterns of the issue are very similar everywhere in the world. So I needed to know from women, and from organizations that are service providers, and from advocates, what they need the most, where are the issues of access, like what kind of barriers there are, that we can build a tool that will kind of eliminate these barriers. So it was a lot of work and conversation with survivors, with organizations, also with advocates, with human rights lawyers, also with governmental agencies, to understand all the pieces, that who are the stakeholders, and how we can make sure that these stakeholders can be more accessible for those who need them. How we make sure that these services are available and accessible to women, and what's the role of the technology, what kind of bridge I have to build.
So kind of like created an ecosystem around the problem.
Yes. So, and the app itself, the entire technology itself, is an ecosystem of support that we build around women. So it's a very human-centric approach right from the beginning, on what they need and what are the pieces that are missing. And then I started wireframing based on the fact that, for example, I understood that some women would escape home and they will not know where to go, and it's difficult for them to search and find this organization. Sometimes there is a shelter or an organization in their city, but they would walk some 40 kilometers to find help. While and they have smartphone, but by just going to SafeU now, they can see what are the available resources in their city. Or in many cases, women would say, "I feel so alone. I was always thinking that I'm the only person in this world facing these issues." But then they go to our forum section and they just talk with other women, not necessarily with organizations and professionals that we of course have, and it's a very important part of it. But I also understood that the help of community is not leveraged anywhere when it comes to this issue. So we had to create this virtual space, virtual community, where women will also be able to support each other, to share their stories, to be heard, to get consultation from professionals, to start their interaction, communication with organizations right there, because there was also a lot of geographic barriers for these women. And we launched the app during pandemic, so it also was very symbolic, because this bridge that we were building was even more needed during lockdown.
Okay, so you built the wireframes all alone.
Yes.
You didn't have anyone helping you building wireframes, did
No.
you? Okay, great. You wrote the specifications
Yes.
for the people who would be doing that, the engineers. And then what did you do? Did you send those to a team of engineers?
Yes. So actually what I have done, I understood that I have to be very specific with developers, with the team of developers, because what is my vision, what is the service here, what's the mission, everything is just in my head. So I have to be very specific to write it down in a way that every screen is described with every button and every connection with another button. And then I remember first piece that I wrote, it was very big, like it had a lot of AI parts in it. It was very expensive, let's say, a TOR to execute it.
That was for the prototype itself.
Yes, for the prototype. And then from my probably 25 pages, I had to bring it to only 3 very specific screens that what needs to be there and what's the function of each screen. Then I started working with the UI UX designer team because, I talked first with the developers to understand what will be the costs, and then I eliminated also more pieces from it, just kept those who are enough to create an MVP prototype, I would say. And then I started working with UI UX designers to make sure that they understand and it's still intuitive and women will also understand how to use it. So I had to do this work going back to women, asking if it's clear, if you understand what this button does. I mean, it was a lot of work with potential users and UI UX designer team. And then after that, of course, we started working with developers, understanding how to how this can be also implemented, what kind of languages, etc. Because again, there were some pieces that I had to move to my wish list and to put on my strategy for the next year and the third year right now. So we have strategy for like 10 years on what are the things that we still need to build. But of course, the market is every year, every month is dictating also other things. So it's one thing what you picture, what you wish for, and another what you will also need to hear from market constantly.
Yeah. Okay, we got that. And then once the prototype was ready, you had I'm going to call it shitty first draft of the product, because that's what usually happens, right? And then what happened? Were you able to find funding? Were you able to sell the product to someone, or
Yes. So when it was all ready, it was this peak of COVID. Then I started having calls with Armenian stakeholders like UN agencies, Armenian organizations that are dealing with domestic violence issues, gender-based violence issues. But also I understood that probably only Armenia is not enough. And I had this call with my best friend, who is Georgian, who is a human rights lawyer. I said, listen, that's what we have created. I pitched to her, and then she says, this is great. We need this in Georgia. And then she connected me with our other friend who has an NGO actually, that works with survivors of domestic violence, sexual violence, and it's one of the biggest organizations in Georgia. And then she said, okay, we need this. And then they raised a small urgent funding, if I'm not mistaken, from USAID.
Nice.
And that's how it started in Georgia, and it's still working there, has a lot of users, and we now have other projects together, joint projects together in Georgia. Yes, that's how it started. So first month we launched in Armenia. Next, in May, it was already available also in Georgia.
Yeah, and I'm assuming there are probably country-to-country differences in terms of adoption of the product.
Yes,
In Georgia, I'm assuming that people are more digitally included. Is that correct? Or is Armenia better digitally included in terms of
Well, I
smartphone
think that in
penetration?
Armenia we constantly have this issue of trust, like trusting things.
Yeah.
While in Georgia, probably this is not the case, also because their civil society is more established and had more time to be established, if we can say, just because they started their democratic path much earlier than we did. Probably also because we have a lot of issues on our borders, like security issues. So in Armenia, I think the work that you have to do to build the trust, it takes more time. That's what we experienced actually than what you need in other countries. That's very interesting. I mean, other countries where we are right now.
Right. Post-Soviet Union mostly, right? Countries.
Well, now we are in Georgia, in Iraq.
What?
Yes, in
Really?
Iraq,
That's
yes.
amazing.
In Romania.
Okay.
And in one state in United States.
Okay.
And for the next year, plan is to go also to other Eastern European countries. So Poland, Slovakia, Moldova, and Ukraine are going to be part of it. So yes, they are kind of some of them also post-Soviet countries.
Ukraine is going to be a challenge, though, considering the state they're in right now.
Yes, but also they need this, considering the state, the situation, because any crisis just exacerbates the situation and results in increase in gender-based violence. And because also the services are struggling with their work to reach the people that need them, they will definitely need, and that's what our assessments also show, that they will definitely need an innovation and technology in place to also create this network of support.
Yeah, that makes sense. You don't have a tech background, and there is this assumption, and usually, and when I was pitching my products, this was usually the case, like, you don't have a tech background. Are you sure you'll be able to build this product? So for me, this is a topic that I always ask all of the founders that are, especially who don't have a technical background. Do you have any hurdles? Do you experience any hurdles with not being technical in your work right now? Is there, like, if you had more technical background, would it be easier for you? Or do you think like it doesn't really matter?
I think it doesn't really matter, to be honest, because technology is a tool to create the means to achieve your mission. So, and for this, you can always have professionals, you can have people in your team to whom you can trust to build that piece of the entire mission. And of course, it required from me a lot of learning. We still need to speak the same language sometimes, because in the beginning I was asking for some things that only maybe now, thanks to the advancement of technology, it's possible to do.
ChatGPT, per se.
Yes, but yes, it required a lot of learning. It required a lot of understanding, and then understanding what's the best way to communicate what needs to be done with your tech team, and also how to facilitate in many ways the conversation between your UI UX designer and between your tech team. And yes, this is something that I'm also very grateful to have my best friend, who is our COO. She doesn't have a technical background either, even though right from the university she was one of the best at this informatics, like this technology things, but still. She also had a lot of learning because she was the first person to join me. I called her, I remember, and then I started like convincing her to join me. And yeah, it was very interesting because I could feel that she doesn't believe in the problem or in the solution or in the product. Like there was a lot of hesitations in her voice that I can. But as a friend, she believed in me, and that was the very important and I would say the most crucial step to take SafeU to the next level back in 2020, 2021.
Yeah.
It was her belief to join, and I would say that then she played a very important role in creating this very clear communication with our CTO, with our technical team, and then because in many cases with startups you just work with lack of human resources, and you need to be one person with 10, sometimes 20 heads.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm very lucky that I'm not the only one with many heads, and she's also the person with many heads, handling a lot of that part, and yes.
I think you mentioned a couple of things that you had to learn throughout this journey since founding of SafeU, but I want to know what are some personal characteristics that you had to develop, because now you're leading a big team and you have headquarters in Yerevan, you have Gyumri, and you have Fanazor.
Yes,
correct?
and we also have a company in US. Well, I would say also we already have a team there, partners that are working for us and with us.
So like business development mostly, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, but you do have a large team, and so what I want to know is what type of qualities did you have to develop throughout this time that would allow you to manage a large team?
Well, one thing is my own determination. First, that I stayed true to myself in every decision that I make, in every crucial decision. Of course, there are like small decisions that I'm not going deep into my intentions, but most of the decisions that are coming, that they're coming from my source. So this is one thing that never changed, actually, I would say, even in my life. But right now I have a very direct connection with myself. I know who I am, and I'm very responsible about it, because I understand that my decision can affect and impact not only my team, but also so many women that trust it and are using what we have created, so many organizations, also governments. So what I have to I need to have this self-accountability and connection, pure connection with my true intentions, let's say. This is a very, very important part for me, because I am the instrument with what I am creating the change, or I'm acting with this. I don't have any other means to act. My decisions can't come from outside. It should come from inside, because it's a new thing, and this is a path, this is a trailblazing action every single day, I would say. So one thing is that, and being very straightforward and very determined on, focused on the mission, but in the same time be completely flexible. This is like two contradictory things, actually, it might seem, but in the meantime, it's impossible. If you're very flexible, then you can lose your way, and you can lose your determination in what you want to achieve. So there, it should be very firm vision, but in the meantime, flexibility in all the tactics, in all the small things, listening to others, being also very observant. When you are speaking all the time, and when you are on the stage, it creates this moment that you start missing the observation. Because if you are the person to whom people are listening, then
it's like a one-way street.
Yes, one-way street. And that's why it's very important for me to sometimes just step back in a way that I can also be observing my team, observing partners, observing the situation. I mean, even in the conferences, I like having at least this 10 minutes or 20 minutes where I don't need to talk. I don't need to be doing this performance, but I can just be there and observe and make sure that I am flexible enough to learn and to change also my tactics in different situations. This is kind of, it's when you are talking also with someone, you are self-aware about yourself, but in the same time you are reflecting on the situation. So it's 3 actions in the same time. It's one is a very active action, another one is just the understanding of the situation, the awareness of the situation, and then the third level for me is always the reflection, like, okay, what is this about and where it leads. And keeping these, I would say, pieces all together in me, being centered around this, and that what I would say the combination of skills that I have right now.
That's amazing. It's almost like a spiritual revelation that you have achieved in a way, like a balance between the outer and the inner, and being able to ground yourself in yourself. Yeah, it's interesting. I think, did you have to break a lot of assumptions that you had before about the world, about how things are done? Because, you know, you go through this transformation, and especially when you turn 30, and I think that's around the age when you started the company, right?
Yes.
It's kind of like the world changes, and now you have to build everything up from zero, and you have it's a different world for some reason. I don't know. At least for me, that was the case. How was it for you?
Well, I would say that yes, I need to adapt a lot. I needed to adapt a lot, and but that's what makes me also to grow, because I love experiencing myself always on the edge of the things, being
You mean like
outside of comfort
comfort?
zone. I don't experience any growth when I am in my comfort zone. I love also being sometimes in my comfort zone with myself at my peace, but those are moments for rest. But then when you gain this peace, you have this rest, then again, this world is just moving. You have to go and again be part of that great movement. And there you have to adapt every second. It's a new world. Every other new moment brings challenges, opportunities, new ways of thinking, new ways of being. But again, there is one thing that never changes, which is, I would say, my inner child, if I can call it that way, that has this absolute freedom, and my adult who needs to be always on the forefront of the happenings to protect my child, because this child is the source of life also for me in many ways, but also knowing that the awareness where you exist, where the world is right now. One thing that I would say that I struggled a lot, and I'm still struggling, is the time itself, because I always have this assumption that things should be moving much faster than they are moving, because of the efforts that we put. But we understand that this is not only about our efforts, it's about the world. There are processes, there are things that have a completely different pace of change, while we want this change to happen sometimes faster. And this is something that I have to become friends again and again with time. This is something that I'm still working on, to also be at peace with our efforts and the pace of change.
Yeah. I'm going to say something very spiritual, like a guru right now, but I think there is no time, right? It's just something that people made up as in terms of time. So probably what you need to develop is more like patience, because you plant the seeds and you're like, okay, guys, come on, it's time to grow, it's time to become trees. And
Yes.
so probably patience is where, because you put in a lot of effort and time into something, and then you're expecting this to grow super fast, but it takes time because it's a large initiative. These are problems that haven't been tackled decades on end. So yeah, I think that probably, if I'm not mistaken, of course.
Yes, and it comes also to the situations that we want to change, the challenge, but also it comes to the business growth, like in how many places we should be and we can be, and all the processes. It just takes more time, and probably sometimes I'm thinking that my issue with the time is also that there is such a big urgency, because people are dying, and this is happening every second, every minute, and then by just understanding that if we were more committed and united, then we could help those people much faster because it's an urgent issue. And this urgency then creates in me this conflict with the time and the actors who are able to influence the situation. That's the only piece where I don't have patience, and I don't have, that's the thing of waiting, because in my understanding, in my belief, we can create the perfect conditions or good enough conditions around that seed to grow with the maximum speed. I'm not saying like to change entirely, but of course this is possible, and that's why we have technologies, and that's why we created SafeU to also bring some acceleration to the processes, and understanding that it's an urgent issue that requires an urgent response.
Yeah, urgent response and solution. That's right. Talking about gender-based violence, you mentioned like women die because of this, right? That happens. Around 1 in 4 Armenian women are subject to either physical or psychological abuse, and most probably physical, is because psychological is harder to identify, right? What would you say is the biggest barrier in Armenia that prevents you from being able to tackle this issue more effectively? What is it that you are trying to overcome, but it's really hard? It's like a difficult hurdle for you.
Well, I can say, can bring example on one of the SafeU users that was living in an abusive relationship for 25 years, and she decided finally to leave when the abuser tried also to kill her son.
Was it in Yerevan or in regions?
In regions. But she's originally from Yerevan. The main issue then, when it comes to financial security, to access to any financial means for them, because domestic violence comes with a big amount of economic violence, which includes all the tactics to make sure that she doesn't have any independence. She's completely dependent on the abuser, and leaving him means also losing this space for survival, because somehow he provides space, food sometimes. So this is a very big obstacle when it comes to people who already decide to leave this relationship or to do something to protect themselves, to not be killed. But then, what's the way that these women can start their lives? Also, in many cases, we understand that, for example, if she had a brother, then parents inherit, like they gave the heritage to the son.
Yeah, of course.
Yes. Especially this is in the regions by tradition, this is how it should be. This patriarchy itself, in so many ways, it's a big obstacle because of this cultural, because of our stereotypes. Everything plays its own negative role, creating a situation where women's perspectives are limited. Our potential is not realized, and this creates a lot of barriers to overcome the issue of gender-based violence. When it comes to sexual violence, there is so much stigma around the issue that people don't report, and even if they report, then there is a lot of issues in our law enforcement that we need to train these investigators, prosecutors on how these cases should be handled. And there is a piece of it, it's a patriarchy, the social cultural norms that play a very negative role. Another is our systemic issues rooted in our systems that needs to be improved, changed. There should be some shift of mentality, practices, and social cultural norms. But unfortunately now I see that even in these TV shows, these bad social cultural norms are reinforced. They're not.
They're
They
not
just
eradicated.
Yes, they're not eradicated. And even though I have to also admit that we did a big progress within last 2 decades, I would say, and now I can see that there is also will to change the situation, but there is still a long way to go for us to state that we created a situation where we are eliminating these barriers of access.
Yeah, and I think I read somewhere an article where it talked about this woman who was abused at home, obviously, and she went and she reported it to the police officer. And instead of solving the issue and just, doing what they need to do by law, they scolded her and told her that it's wrong to snitch against your husband. You need to make sure that you never do this again. So this woman, obviously, I don't know what happened to her after this, but she never reported any other instances of abuse after that, I'm assuming. So I think you're right, it's not just, it's social norms, it's mentality, but it's a systemic change needs to take place, and that work needs to be done on all the levels. And I'm glad you started it from one level. But you also work with a lot of multiple stakeholders, right? This is a multi-stakeholder thing.
We're also working with police in Armenia, and I have to say that within the leadership of police, like heads of department, there is a big will and commitment to solve this issue. And there is also this very big interest in adopting the technologies that can help them with that, which is a very big progress. Of course, they understand that they lack training. Their police officers need to be trained also, because they go there with their own stereotypes, with their own views, and maybe something that they have seen in their families or they continue to do in their families, and this is not an easy task. So the second piece of SafeU is the platform that we created and AI-based data analytics system. So while we're talking about systemic change, I have to say when we talk about SafeU, say we're disrupting violence to create systemic change. So in one way, we're protecting women, we're creating this ecosystem of support around them. But then we're analyzing all personally non-identifiable data through our data analytics. And we have special AI algorithms that help us to better understand if there is a way for specific groups of population that are at a higher risk of gender-based violence to prevent it. So at least we inform policymakers and civil society organizations what's the situation with different ethnic groups, demographics, across different behaviors, what are the gaps in knowledge, and what can be then done to specifically address these issues that we were able to see thanks to our data analytics system. And this is a piece that, in our views, should be playing more and more role in systemic change, in also working hand in hand with human rights lawyers, with advocates for human rights. So this is a very important piece of technology, because our ultimate goal in the end of the day is to prevent violence against women. And that's where we see also the role of technology, because nowadays we see a lot of money invested from government budget in all over, like, most of the countries to address this issue. But when it comes to looking at the statistics and the situation, we see that we were not working on prevention side. We're working on just protection and response side sometimes, and then the statistics just repeat every year. We have, unfortunately, there is no country in the world that can be proudly say that, okay, we don't have this issue in our country, and which shows that there should be some other ways of working with the same issue, and AI using advanced data analytics methods, also making sure that women are equipped with necessary tools to report. This should be one of, let's say, this game-changing pieces on the table of all this joint effort against gender-based violence globally.
Okay, two more questions about gender-based violence. One is, I know it's funny. It shouldn't be funny, but it's really funny for me. Are there any cases in Armenia when gender-based violence happens against men?
Well, of course, yes, there were cases. Actually, there are cases when this can be seen as violence against men, but it was just protection, self-defense cases. So there are cases, of course, of violence against men. Unfortunately, we don't see them in our app, in our data analytics. So I can say from the SafeView perspective, we have some men using our app.
Really?
Even though they have to respect the fact that this is a virtual safe space for women, and there are very strict rules how they can behave, and all the users are using the app, especially the part of community discussions with their nicknames, so nobody knows their identity.
Yeah.
But yes, there are men that don't feel safe even walking in the streets, and
would you say that's more, the LGBTQ community representatives?
I would say yes. We also have, because we are working also with these organizations, of course, in Armenia, they're part of our network. But not only. I personally know men who are using it because, for example, they work late at night and they have this shift and they are working for security and they need to let their friends know that if they are in danger. So this is also interesting part of it. And then they say, we're not using the part that is more about this community discussions, but the safety piece is something that we also need, which is...
It's very handy.
Yes,
yeah,
it is.
I think that's amazing. So in terms of when we talk about social, cultural norms in Armenia, I think this is something that has been slowly changing. But when I look back, let's say 10 years ago, the situation was even worse in terms of for women, right? I remember I would walk down the street and one day I was wearing a pretty revealing dress. It showed some cleavage. And I remember this older gentleman who was probably in his 70s or something. He just walked by me and he said, "Shame on you." And he spit on me, in the middle of the street. That was a traumatic experience for me. So I think this is a psychological, probably emotional abuse, right, against gender for wearing certain things that are not in the standard mind frame for them. How do you handle or think about this issue of emotional abuse? Because that happens, which is harder to identify within a family, for instance.
Well, this is an issue, if we can come back to SafeView, then how it's done is done through our discussion rooms, where we have professionals that are initiating discussions around multiple issues, like some sexual violence, which is again a taboo topic, or psychological violence. And all of this is mostly about raising awareness about the issue, because first thing that you have to do is to identify that whatever is happening with me, signs of abuse, what kind of signs of abuse, not only about physical abuse, of course, and usually it starts with controlling behavior, and then there are so many pieces in the in different situations, like stalking is different thing, victim blaming, gaslighting, and all of these pieces, they, first of all, we need to know about them and understand how to deal with them, who are people who can help us with this. So we do also programs of there's trauma-informed therapies, therapy sessions, also offline, of course. In Armenia, SafeView, it's not only an online platform, just because we're physically here, so we also have our foundation, and through this foundation, we conduct different programs. And in most of the cases in these programs, what we have is awareness raising, and we have doctors, lawyers, psychologists, our consultants that are counseling those who need it. And it can be also group therapies or individual therapies. And our lawyers take cases to the court. I mean, for example, that case,
Yeah.
depending on...
I would love to sue his ass, honestly, if I could. But he's probably
Yes.
no longer with us at
Yeah,
this point.
I remember just a year ago, I came back from Paris. It was a long trip, so I was in US. It was very successful. Then I've spoken in UN, this very high-level events that
The
year.
CSW, the Commission for Status of
Yes,
Women.
but then I was in Chicago, invited by U.S. Department of State, and then after that I had to fly to Paris to receive my award from Cartier Women's Initiative. Then I had this very beautiful conversation also with Amal Clooney, and then I met with amazing people, amazing entrepreneurs from the world. Then I'm coming back. I'm going back to the office that day, very happy about all these achievements, to tell these stories to my team, to, I don't know, give this small chocolate or souvenirs that I brought with me.
Right.
And then I'm walking, and then there is a car just driving next to me, so very slowly, and then it takes this window down, and then like, in Armenian says, "Oh, but the sinch gankes." And then he's just staring at me, and I'm like, just my state of mind at that moment that I did.
Amal Clooney, man, come on.
I did all that things. I established that partnership with US. I met with these people, that people, with US government. Everything is going in a perfect way. I had this amazing week in Paris, and then I'm now finally back as a kind of a hero. And then he just like reminded me,
there's so much work to do.
Where we are. Yes, there's so much work to do. And then I looked at him, and then he understood there was something in my eyes that I was about already to be very... I don't know, he started driving very fast and he left. But then it was a very good reminder that no matter what you do, like no matter what, like how successful you are or how strong you are, if you're a woman, and you're alone, if there was a guy next to me, it would never happen, right? Because if I don't belong to someone, then I can also potentially belong to...
You can be subject to different types of comments.
Yes, in Yerevan, sometimes when I walk, I have a feeling that my body is not mine. It's like everyone's else, but not mine, because people are looking at me the way that, especially if you're like dressed up or something, they look at you in a way so that
you're a piece of meat.
Yes, and it's very interesting. And I don't know if you have noticed or not, men in Armenia in the yards, if you just go and walk, they just have these clusters, like 8 to 15 guys just standing together, and every 100 meter you can meet them.
Yeah.
I don't know what it means. I don't know, it's from my childhood, these clusters.
Yeah.
And then you go, and of course they all look at you. Yeah. And it's so interesting. Was observing like girls that are trying to walk really very fast if they are walking next to them, and they try to not look at them.
Yeah.
It's you can see that they're very uncomfortable walking and passing these guys.
Yeah.
And recently what I started to do, I'm just walking very slowly, and I'm looking into their eyes. You have to see their reaction, because this is something that they have never experienced, that they want to understand, what is this creature?
What is she doing?
What is she doing?
Are you okay?
Yes, are you okay? But this is the only way that you can show your position and show the boundaries of also your position. But it's very difficult, of course, for... even my teammates, I can see that sometimes they walk next to these big groups of guys, and they just want to escape that very uncomfortable space. Yeah. I like embracing the confrontation, and they feel very uncomfortable, men, when you confront them that way, but then they don't understand what is happening. But this is Yerevan. This is in the city center, what I'm right now describing. Wow. So imagine what it is if you go and walk in a village, in the regions. And this is something that we women, nobody is going to do it for us. We have to own this change. We have to own our own spaces, and in real life and in digital life. Otherwise, it's already owned by men. And to bring this balance, which will then in turn be beneficial for the entire society and humanity and peace in the world, this is something that we have to do.
Yeah.
No one is going to do it instead of us.
If we leave it for them, they're probably not going to do it. But for me, after the incident that I told you about, I felt so much shame and guilt that I didn't wear that dress again, ever, which I probably should have. I should have worn it today.
Of course.
But it is a trauma response, right? Because you
Right.
think like, I am to blame, it's my problem, shame, like, all of that. I think it's what you're doing is really empowering. I have a last question for you, though. Armenian tech ecosystem, is it a big boy club?
I would
should I
say
say big
it
boys
is, because if you look at the main like startup events happening, speakers, you'll see mostly men.
Yep.
If it comes to CEOs, COOs, CTOs, they're again majority men. Of course, we can be very proud that we have more than 38% of women in tech. I mean, it's great if we compare us with other countries, and we see this number only growing. But it's middle management, it's
Product
product
managers,
managers, marketing, yes, and developers also. But when it comes to this high decision making, no. I have been in many times speaker in different events where I am the only woman. Or I remember I was a jury in this AI startup event. Again, I was the only woman, 6 men. And I have to say that we also have a very different views on the things. I mean, for example, what I would value, of course, finances, business model, market fit, everything is important. But then what's the impact? What's the mission there? How this is going to serve humanity? How this is going to create any change? How important it can be to create another vision, another mentality around people? Change some social norms, etc. So these are the questions that I pay attention to, but I can't say that I see the similar views from men. And even look at our government meetings every week. If you watch it, you will see men talking with men, making decisions for the country where more than half of the population are women. And we are affected by their decisions, but we are not decision makers. I'm very happy that we have a democratic country, very happy about this. But for me, I always say that this is a half democracy.
Yeah.
Because it's a democracy for men or by men. But to call it a full democracy, because demos is like people, we are also people,
Yeah.
And we have to decide our destiny. And that's what I also think that we should own our own spaces and our own decision-making power to do this.
I love it. And with that, thank you so much for this honest conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I hope people will get something out of this. Mostly probably inspiration to start whatever startup you guys are doing. Just put it on paper, build a prototype, do it, launch it. If you fail, it's a lesson.
Yes.
If you succeed, you succeed.
Yes.
Thank you so
much. And let your inner child to inspire you. I know that a lot of people can inspire you, but I think the main source of inspiration comes from within. Thank you.
Love it. Thank you.